Thank you for coming to the first OWASP San Antonio meeting of 2025. Yes, the chapter continues to grow. We have over 300. We'll talk about that later on. Today, our focus is on adventures in shift left. And what I should say there is it's really not just shift left. It's optimizing AppSec controls and AppSec best practices wherever they're best suited for the SDLC, right? Whether that's in design, whether that's in production and so forth. So we have speakers today and presentations that range from partnering with stakeholders to best implement controls to technical presentations. So I think we have a wide variety of presentations and presenters. So I think you're really going to enjoy it. Next slide. Actually, I have the controller. Okay. For our agenda today, I'm going to be talking about the board, employment, chapter charter. There's the presentations. We have Frost Bank presenting today, Snyk. We're going to have a break, and then contrast, security, and check marks. Then we always like to talk about topics for future meetings and get your input. That's been really successful. So get your input to determine what the next subject's going to be. We'll do membership and door prizes. Hopefully you all get your raffle tickets when you came in. And then we're going to be closing out the meeting, and we're going to have a happy hour. You should have got 2 drink tickets. So that's important. We'll all network. You get to meet some of the sponsors that are here as well. So next, here we go. There we go. So these are some of our sponsors today. Snyk, Contrast, CheckMarx, and WallArm. If you get a chance during break or during the networking hour, please talk to them. It's the sponsors that enable this events to happen. We're really appreciative of the sponsors. This is our board. I'm currently the leader of the San Antonio chapter. And then we have Brent for vendor relations and sponsorship. Chris, who's not here today, for membership and chapter communications. Rodney Fielding for helping the presentation content and planning. Aisha Sohina for finance and budget. And of course, our audiovisual guys. You can see it's kind of a complex setup here. Thank goodness for them. We got Zuri Willis and Xavier Jimenez helping with that. And then you've met our chapter admin support up front. Welcome everyone, Ari Lozano and Donna Mejingos. So thanks to our board. Without the board, this wouldn't go too well. Next slide here. All right. So this is a part of the meeting where we ask folks that may be looking for a position, stand up, tell us a little bit about yourself and what type of position you're looking for. Is anybody here looking for a career change or positions? Okay, great. So you're open to other types of testing, but you have experience with dynamic application testing. Okay, very good. Anyone else? Okay, great. Any employee? Oh, yes. Someone over there. I'm
a student studying for my. My name is Alex Gonzo. I'm a student studying for my bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance. I'm looking for any internships or entry-level positions anybody's offering. I've been learning JavaScript and Node.js and building out a personal website and doing a lot of practice on the side. I'm studying towards my Network Plus and Security Plus certifications right now, and so if anybody has any openings that fit me, I'm I'm very interested. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any companies looking to fill positions? Oh, yeah, another, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. You need another mic over here. Oh, yeah, he said, all right.
My name is Alex Bailey. I currently work overnight, but I recently just graduated, so basically fresh out of the gates. Graduated from UC cybersecurity. So I'm basically just like a baby out here among all of you guys, but I'm basically just looking for any entry level position. Very moldable, what I want to get into, but really I'm trying to look into application security. But like I said, anything that's like available, can get into.
Okay, great. Thanks, Alex. Anyone else looking for positions? Okay. Any companies looking to fill positions right now? If you want to stand up and tell us what you're looking for. I think we have someone in the back there.
So if there's anyone that we can help, please make sure you grab my card before the end of the day and I'll engage with our technology.
Great. Any other companies with open positions? Yes, I've got one here.
My name is Adrian. I work for Prospect on cybersecurity. I know that helping is supposed to get, but we should be having internship soon for both my team and the cybersecurity operations center team. It's not uncommon for those who turn into full-time positions. So it's, and you do a lot of the same work that are. So.
Excellent. Excellent. I think we had someone in the back here.
Hi, my name is Paul Nadeau with Palo Alto Networks. We do have several engineering positions open. Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas area. Just due to growth, not due to attrition. So there's that. But what we're looking for is advanced cybersecurity and networking backgrounds. So if you know of anybody in those areas, you can go to jobs.paloaltonetworks.com and look at it.
Any other companies? Going once? Oh yeah, there we go.
Identity access analyst, identity analyst, people who often get you into a knock tech role, get you started, then is cybersecurity analyst, infrastructure side, some app.
So we have about a couple dozen people online. So if you're going to talk, please wait for a mic to come close to you so they can hear you. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
My name is Crystal Quandro. So we have on the security architecture team a senior position for an architect, and with the role, we're looking for somebody specializing in microservices. So if you know anyone or could be that candidate, please let us know. Apply.
And that is with Frost Bank.
With Frost Bank, yes. Sorry, thank you.
Great. That's good company. I've heard of them before. Anyone else looking for to fill some positions? Got one right here. Need a mic? Mike's coming. Yeah.
So guys, my name is Diego. I'm with HB, application security, camera security. We're looking for an AppSec engineer too. Preferably, like it doesn't matter if you have to do security. We're looking for someone with strong engineering skills. Do a lot of like Terraform, GitLab, Sky, automation, Python, AWS, do a lot. So you guys are interested. I look for that rec on the APC here. And feel free to talk to us. Never get a chance to chat.
I think I saw someone else. Somebody else looking for fill positions? Is that it? Going once, going twice? Okay, so. All right. that working? Whoops. Can you go back? Sorry, with some technical difficulties here. Forward. Okay, that's good. So just a little bit about our charter and some of the services we provide for OWASP San Antonio. So we provide information on guidelines, standards, tools, processes, best practices, information on training opportunities in education, even information on metrics. You know, how do you measure if your AppSec program is successful, right? If you're heading in the right direction. And of course, the ability to collaborate across industries on all of the above. So that's our charter. Welcome everyone that's new to the charter here today. Folks that have attended before, thank you for coming. Whoops. Okay. And with that, we're going to get our presentation started. First, I'd like to introduce Vipul Gupta, Senior Vice President of Frost Bank. Good luck with that. Okay.
Can you all hear me okay? All right, perfect. Hey, it's an honor to be here, but before I get started, I want to recognize a very special person in the room. We have Jeff Williams. He is the founding member of the OWASP Foundation, and so it's an honor to have you here, Jeff. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk about our journey. It's with AppSec.
You make up a down one. One more.
All right. Okay. So this is just my opinions. It's not anything that Frost opinion. So this is just purely based on my experience and what I've observed over my journey with AppSec program at Frost. So a little bit about me. I'm not going to go over too much of it. I went to USC, Gamecocks, and then love playing with my dogs and road trips. So at Frost, I currently manage these programs. Started with AppSec. They hired me to roll out their AppSec program, and then slowly but surely building up. It's very good experience for me to learn from building new programs. I'm going to breeze through some of these sites quickly so we can focus on what really matters, right? So technology is going to continue to evolve. It's important for us to continue to evolve our programs so that they don't become stagnant, and we are there to support our business, the business growth and the technology growth. So in banking alone, for example, customers are asking for things over the last 3 decades. They've been asking for, like, earlier it used to be SMS banking, mobile deposit, online, P2P. Now it's more of crypto, biometric, and so on and so forth. So the point of the slide is customers will be asking for new things, new features, and we as security professionals need to be keeping up pace to support our business. So usually when we have technology adoption, initially we might see slow adoption, like some read-only functionality being offered, or like you may only be able to check the last 20 transactions or something like that. And when we talk to our business partners, you may hear something like, oh, but it's only read-only functionality at this point, but it's not going to stay like that, right? So security must be cognizant of near-term and long-term business goals, so that when we implement security controls, we have that longer-term vision in mind. So how do we avoid catching up? Traditionally, security plays catch up. Business goes and tries to implement something, and then security comes in and tries to secure it. So we want to engage and align with business. It's very important to make sure we know what the business is trying to achieve and how and when security needs to partner there. Communication is important. We need to make sure that we have two-way communication. We know exactly what they're working on, but at the same time, they also know how we can help them establish those business outcomes. And then, of course, we have to scale and grow our security program to to keep up with. So what happens when we are not aligned with the business? Of course, data breaches. If security is not involved at the right time and the right controls are not in place, data breaches can become an issue. It can be because of a misconfiguration or security just getting bolted on. So that's one of the outcomes of misalignment. Adverse customer experience. So if security is not part of it, if security is not blended in with software development, with these features that are being rolled out, then can lead to worse customer experience in terms of either the features are not getting released on time, or there's frequent updates that need to be made to the product just because we have to patch the security. It can also overwhelm your teams. When things go bad, customers are going to call center. If it's a widespread issue, it's going to overwhelm your call center team. What that happens then is that the product team starts getting calls. Okay, how can we address this issue? Most of our customers are facing this. So that's when the product teams can also get overwhelmed. And then security also. If we are not aligned with the business and what's going to happen as a security professional, our priorities are going to be changing constantly. It can really demotivate your security teams as well if the priorities are constantly changing. So it's very important to be in alignment with the business. And of course, another outcome of not being aligned is we have security and technical debt. It could be it could be number of security findings that the team needs to patch, or it could be now we have all these outdated softwares and servers that we need to replace. So it can be a combination of both. And then all of these will have an increased cost to the organization. And please make it interactive. If you have a question, don't wait till the end. Just raise your hand and we'll have a conversation. So how do we avoid misalignment? Is by being in constant communication with our key stakeholders. So how do we communicate? So some of the avenues for communication that we have had on our side are like, how do we communicate with product teams? So with product teams, we meet with them periodically to see what their product roadmap looks like, and also see what the status of those things look like, right? Where are they within the development of that particular feature? We also meet and give them kudos when they do a good job with fixing things. We want to make sure that we recognize them for doing a good job. And then we share metrics with them. For example, hey team, this is what we are tracking from a vulnerability perspective. Is this on your roadmap? Is it on your radar as well to address? Then we have technical committees. Technical committees are composed of managers and senior managers in the organization. So let me go back. So what we take to the technical committees is wins, of course. What are the things that are working well? If there's a team that has done a good job, we go to that committee and we recognize that team for doing a good job. It's a good way to motivate your developers and any other stakeholder. And then we talk about what has went well, not just the kudos, but what has went well. If we have been able to significantly reduce the risk or whatever that may be. But also we present metrics, including SLA violations. What are the things that are not getting addressed? The purpose of sharing this is not to call out a particular team, but figure out, is there an underlying problem that may be causing for findings not to be addressed? And usually when we present this, we get a lot of support from our upper management and we are able to reduce the risk to Frost. How often are you meeting? Excellent question. So on the product teams, it really just depends on what their product life cycle looks like. And with some teams, we are meeting monthly, or we start monthly. When we establish a new partnership, we meet with them monthly, but then we increase the cadence to every other week. It just depends on how frequently they're rolling out features, how frequently they're their roadmap changes, usually at least monthly. And then the technical committees are also monthly. So then we have the executive committees, which is comprising of executives with common interests like risk. So we'll have a risk committee, which will comprise of human resource risk, enterprise risk, physical security risk, information security risk, so on and so forth. They get together and they talk about what's the overall risk to the organization. What we say to them is, if we perceive any concern that might be a widespread issue with the organization, we take it to this committee to help get buy-in from them. And then also buy-in on big initiatives. If we need to bring in some technology, if we need to solve for a systemic issue at the organization and we need funding for it, this is where we go to get buy-in before we go to the board for the funding. So next is board. So we take our wins to them. Of course, we want to tell them what is going well. We also want to take to them if we have any regulatory concerns or if there's any major incident, just to keep that transparency, that communication between us and the board. And then if we need funding, that's where we go. So communication is the key, right? Well, we need to communicate when things are going well. And that's important because this gives us an opportunity to share our wins, to build that rapport, to leverage those minor wins for the big wins in the future. And it's also important to communicate when things are not going well. Be transparent. Just, it's okay. Not everything will go our way. And it's important because then it helps build that long-term trusting relationship. And except when things are not going wrong, right. So a few years ago, I had this brilliant idea that I heard in a webinar that we should be reviewing all the user stories that a development team is going to work on. We were a team of 2 and it turned out to be a disaster. In order to roll that process out, I went to the group executives. I had multiple meetings and I said, this is the right way of doing things. 2 months later, I had to go back to them and said, I made a mistake. This is not scalable and we are not going to be doing this anymore. And security is not going to be back. So accept it. It's okay. Be ready to pivot. All right, stakeholder feedback is, I'm sorry for all the animation going down here. Stakeholder feedback is important, right? Listen to them, listen to their pain points so you can adapt your program based on what's not working. So for example, back in the day, a common theme among product teams used to be features are not being released as fast as we'd like. Development team would say security is slowing us down. They're coming at the last minute and they're preventing us from moving faster. So how did we remove security backlog at Frost or bottleneck, sorry. So we integrated security within the CI/CD pipelines. Find an opportunity to make things where we don't need human intervention and it's automatically happening, right? To speed things up. We empowered our developers. We gave them the training that they needed to learn about basic security concepts, and then also give them the tools that they could use to run and find security vulnerabilities before an AppSec team goes in there to find issues. So it helps in reducing security backlog because now the developers have the tools and the knowledge they need to roll out a secure product. Report metrics. Like I said earlier, report when things are not working and when things are working well as well. Escalate where necessary. I have seen time and time again people being hesitant to escalate. It is very, very important to let the right people know when things are not working so that they can help you remove those bottlenecks. Leverage automation where you can. I'll talk a little bit later how we have leveraged automation. Not everything needs to be automated. So just if it's a good candidate for automation, leverage it. And then understand what's happening out in the industry so that you can anticipate what's coming and you can prepare for what's coming. So now I'll talk a little bit about scaling. So of course, we're gonna need funding for, I'll just go through the, yes. So we're gonna need funding for scaling our program. It requires resources. We might need to hire more people. We might need to train our people. We will probably need to adjust our existing processes. We'll probably need to roll out some new processes. For that, we might need funding in form of consulting dollars or extra help from outside. And then technology, of course. As the technology evolves, we need to evolve our security technology as well to keep up with pace with the IT partners. So I've seen, this is very important for scaling programs. Make sure you have executive sponsorship. I've seen multiple times where people would start working on an initiative in a silo, and by the time it goes up the chain for approval, it gets stalled because nobody knew about it. So that initial work will actually help you in the long run. So get that buy-in from executive leadership. For larger initiatives, like for example, data governance, or if you're having a big initiative at your organization, create a committee or council to steer those efforts. The council will help you prioritize what needs to be prioritized, get you the support you need, and help you remove any roadblocks along the way. So establishing a council or committee is very important for the success. Don't try to boil the ocean. Do not try to do it all at once. Take small steps. It's okay. It will take time. Trust me, you will save time by not boiling the ocean. And then extend your partnerships. If you start small with one business unit, don't just stay there, right? Extend your partnerships to other business units as well. Scale your program by establishing those partnerships and extending your processes to other teams. Now, I'll talk a little bit, I'll breeze through this about how we've been leveraging automation. Let me go back one. So metrics, we used to spend about 60 hours a month developing monthly metrics. We thought it was a repeatable process. We put RPA there, and we've been able to reduce this to less than 5 hours a month. So it saved us time. Scan validation. Basically, I'll talk a little bit about what that means. We have a process where we validate whether the developers are doing their job or not when it comes to security scan. This used to take us about 160 hours a month, and it's been reduced to about less than 10 hours over the entire team. Synchronized tracking. So what was happening was we use a vulnerability management database. Developers use Jira. Some teams use Frost now or ServiceNow, and so on, right? So we were reporting off one database and other teams were working off of another database. So we had to synchronize that because what was happening was when we went to those committees to present, they would get frustrated saying, hey, I've already fixed this thing. Why are you presenting this vulnerability to our stakeholders? So it helped us to synchronize that. App inventory, we are working towards a formal process where whenever there's a new application added to our database, we know exactly what it is, and then we can look at what security controls need to be put in place. And then escalations, we have an automated way to escalate things to the appropriate stakeholder based on the severity of the finding and based on what team that finding goes to. So it's a very automated process. It saved about 1,700 hours per year for our team. So how many of you are, yes?
In the automation, are you using off-the-shelf kind of RPA, or are you doing more automation, building like with a Python?
RPA, mainly. And Ben Bravo is here. Ben, raise your hand. He's our automation engineer. If you have any questions, feel free to pick his brain. He's really good at it. How many of you are familiar with the 3 lines of defense model? All right, so I'll quickly give an overview. So 3 lines of defense is where we have 3 lines, right? First line is your business owners. They own the risk. Security doesn't own the risk. So it's their job to identify and track and remediate risk. Second line, your security professionals. Their job is to make sure first line is identifying, tracking, and remediating those risks. So we provide oversight as security professionals. The third line is our internal audit and our external auditors, examiners. They come in to make sure that we as second line are doing our job. Yeah.
So how first line is still identified them? Sometimes it's often hard for first line or ask questions during the law. It's gonna be like estimated. So you have like methodology for like them or how they identify it.
Sure, that's where the communication comes in. That's an excellent question. We used to run into that all the time when we would go to a development team and say, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And then they would tell us, okay, then we would ask them, what can go wrong there? And initially we would get nothing. So we had to work with them, build that dialogue, and over time they would get they would know what is this that the security team is going to ask me about. So it takes time, training, awareness, and just that constant communication. Are we doing on time?
We are 10 minutes.
Okay, good. So I'll share a little bit about what we do here at the first line for our developers do. I'm going to just go through this. So this is what our developers do as a first line control. They conduct the scans per the schedule established by Joe Gregorio's team, our application security. They don't have to just stick to that schedule. They have the tools and the knowledge. They can run a scan anytime they want, but at least they have to follow the schedule. Follow the processes that AppSec has established. All new code needs to go through those processes. We can't bypass. Track and remediate the findings. So our developers, because they have the tools and the knowledge, they are expected to run those scans, identify those findings, track them, and remediate. Engage with the AppSec team on any other security assessment. So we are not just letting them go loose. We are only sharing with them the tools of what we feel comfortable sharing with them, right? They have been using these tools for 10 years. But if they need to do a threat modeling, we are still doing threat models, deep dives on our end, helping the team out, at least for now, and then reach out for guidance as needed. So if, usually we get a call from our dev team or our product team saying, hey, we are trying to do this new thing. Before we make it formal, what are the things we need to be cognizant of? So those are the things that we have a first line do. So how are we able to transition from, we used to do all those tasks to be able to transition those to our developers. So strong partnerships, it takes time. Get to know the people you work with. When you get to know the people you work with, your job becomes easier. Try to understand their side of the story. And I have multiple stories to share. I won't share them now, but if you want to pick my brain, I can share it offline. Training, it's very important to tell your development teams what we are asking them to do and why. And over time, provide them the training, see where they might find value. If you're seeing in your metrics that we have an issue with cross-site scripting, then make sure they have the tools and the knowledge to not have cross-site scripting vulnerabilities in their application. Start small. You don't have to conquer the world in your first step. Start with one team. So years ago, when I brought this topic of, hey, we're going to have our developers run the scans, the first thing I heard from development teams was, we've got a full-time job already. We don't have time to run scans. And I said, I'm actually going to save you time. So I started with one team. We proved over a set of weeks that it's actually saving time and not adding to the developer's plate. And so we were able to use that small win to establish it organization-wide. Yeah, sorry to talk about that. Continuous feedback. It's okay. New processes don't work from get-go. Ask them what's working, what's not working. Change direction when you need. All right, and it's going to require a culture. You alone can't battle it. So make sure you have those stakeholders, you have that buy-in. It's going to take time, and that culture shift is important to shift security towards the left. So I talked about what our first line does. So what do we do at second line? I'm just going to go. So what we do is our second line function, AppSec, ensures that scans are being completed on time. We ensure that the teams that are responsible for writing the code are identifying findings and tracking vulnerability. If a team flags something as false positive, it's the AppSec team's job to go in there and make sure it's indeed a false positive and nobody's just saying it's a false positive because they don't want to do that work. Track SLA for open findings. So we report those monthly metrics and we say these are the things that are not getting addressed. And escalate on non-compliance and then support them as they need support. Don't just leave them in the wild on their own, just have that partnership. So this is what our second line does. And I'll show what the third line does. So third line, internal audit, external auditors, they come in and they make sure that we are doing our job. So they want us to collect evidence of our oversight. So that's where they come in. And the three lines of defense will apply to all security teams. It's not just an AppSec function. It's a concept that can be applied anywhere. Just wanted to share at a very high level some of the tenets of mature security programs. The items you see in black are traditional security teams, but we are seeing more and more of those. I know it's like a teal color here. So more other teams being part of the security programs. So I just wanted to include that in there. We are getting towards the end, so I want to share a little bit about our journey with AppSec. So in 2011 and 2012, we had ad hoc scans that were being done by developers, and it was one person's part-time job that was running those scans. So when that person had time, they would run a scan on findings, and what was happening was they would usually run the scan towards the end of the software development, and at the end, there would be 1,200 findings for dev teams to address before they go live on Monday or whatever. So I was hired in 2013. The team was created. Sorry if it's the font is short. I can share the slides later on. My first task was to formalize what was already happening. So I did that. I started providing training to developers and leverage your third partners or third-party partners. Leverage your vendors. I leveraged back in the day Fishnet. Now Optiv, they helped me. They helped me establish that training for Frost and change the training, switch it over. Every year we have a different scheme or different concept that we would teach we would bring to the table for our developers. I put it on the roadmap because this was a lesson learned for me. Review of user stories. Don't do that. But it was a lesson learned, so I included it there. It was part of a journey. In 2015, I established formal threat modeling. And we started scanning internal applications, and we started automating our static scans. So this was a challenge because before this time, a concept of internal applications being at risk was very foreign. People would think that, hey, this is not connected to the internet, so what's the risk? So I had to help them understand what's at risk. And so this was a big thing. And what we were finding back then, as we were increasing the number of static scans, depending on the developer that was uploading the code base, the scan results would vary. So automating them made sense. So we automated them. It's a consistent payload, and we started to see some consistency in results. Formalized partnerships. Up until this point, I was just meeting with people ad hoc as I learned about what they're working on. But at this point, we had established cadence of who we met with when we met. I established in 2017, a framework for secure software development at Frost. We rolled out the secure coding guidelines, which are based off of OWASP secure coding guidelines. We started doing deep dives. It's just nothing but a deeper level of threat modeling. What we do is we pick an aspect of the application like authentication, and we look at its design and implementation and try to see if we can bypass it. By 2019, we realized we did not have enough people on the team to do threat modeling on our own. So again, we hired a third party to come in, leverage your vendors. We hired a third party to come in and help us with that threat modeling to establish a baseline so that we could take it and maintain it going forward. So in 2020, Joe Gregorio helped me establish a root cause analysis process where for any new finding that we get, we periodically go in and look at all those findings and figure out we have 6 or 7 categories where we map each finding to those categories to see what is there a pattern why we are seeing these things. And in our initial rollout of this process, we found that 40% of our findings were because of misconfigured HTTP headers. That's such an easy thing to fix. So Joe Gregorio, to his credit, helped me establish the HTTP header guidelines. We communicated it to the teams. They knew what was expected, and finally we started seeing that dip within the finding. So that's where that process happened. And then 2021, 2022 is when we started empowering developers, giving them the tools, and they've been running this since. And then last couple of years, we've been just training additional stakeholders, like your product owners, the people that are going to make decision about risk. We're starting to give them some foundational level security training. Okay, this is part of my presentation. So I'm going to try to capture everybody. Okay, I may have to take 2. All right. Yeah, if you have been to any of my presentations, this is part of it. You don't get to just listen to me. And in conclusion, customer expectations will continue to evolve. We must be in alignment with the business. Communication is so important. And this is me. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, connect with me, and I'll be happy to take on that conversation offline.
We have a couple of minutes for questions if anybody has any questions.
Yes.
I really like that. I'm just curious what we can.
So the biggest challenge was when I walked into Frost to establish the AppSec program. AppSec was a foreign concept. And I was coming in and telling developers who have written code their whole life that their code sucks in a very nice way. And so establishing that partnership. Come on. Yeah, Gary can attest to that. So it was a challenge. It's like that culture shift, right? We have to help them understand. We have to listen to them too, because they have a way of doing things, and we have a reason why we are flagging something as a vulnerability. We just need to sit down and talk about it. What else? Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned that you had established. You mentioned that you had established some metrics for enabling automation. What are some of those metrics, right? How do they work?
So the first thing is we need to evaluate what process is a problem process, right? What's taking our time? So we started tracking our time. Where are we spending time? We use Jira for that. It may not be the best tool to track time, but that's what we used. And then when we started seeing the patterns, then we started seeing, is this an avenue for automation? And that's where we took the use case to buy licenses and what. Any other questions? Yes.
If I'm following up on that, you had mentioned how is that
so we have a very streamlined process where we get involved sooner than later as to what the organization is doing. Any technology decision that comes in, Crystal, who's on our security architecture team, her team gets visibility into it. Joe Gregorio has processes in place where his team meets with various lines of businesses and say, these are the things that we are tracking. Is there anything else on your radar that you might be working on soon so that we can start keeping eyes on it? So it's again, communication. Yes, Jeff.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious, you spent more than a decade building a great program with a lot of investment. Can you tell me how big your vulnerability backlog is today, and what your MTTR is fixed vulnerability?
Sure. I don't have my metrics top of my head, but I'll try. Okay.
Yeah.
So on the so we have 2 separate teams that track vulnerabilities: the AppSec team and the infrastructure findings team. So I can speak from an AppSec standpoint, right? So when I first started, my first weekend, I started on a Friday, and they gave me a report with 1,200 findings that said that this product's going out on Monday. And it was my job to help prioritize what needs to be addressed. Yeah. So going from there to helping teams be at 0 findings, like we have no zero. I didn't say that. We do a pretty good job in staying on top of critical highs, medium, and low. We have an SLA. If that SLA is not met, we escalate it. From a defect density perspective, the industry average is about 1 defect per 1,000 lines of code. We are at 0.02. So I think developers are doing a pretty good job in staying up to date with that. MTTR, I'll have to. All right. Anything else? Thanks, everyone. Next.
Next, I want to introduce Joey Arowcavage, who's presenting for cultivating developer adoption in the era of artificial intelligence. We're bringing some AI in. Great.
Hey, Joey. When we get close to time, I'm gonna give you this sign. And you have 5 minutes. Thank you, sir.
So okay, just tell you when the slides are.
So I'm seeing this one now.
Okay, you can go to the first one. All right, yeah, let's get to the first slide. Next one. All right, so we're good to go? This doesn't work at all? All right, cool. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today to talk about cultivating developer adoption in the era of artificial intelligence. Yeah, it's a pretty strong title, I know, but it's not going to be all just buzzwords and jargon. We're really going to talk about how to make developers not just tolerate, but actually embrace the tools and processes that go with them. So a little bit about me. I'm Joey Arowcavage. I'm a solutions engineer at Snyk, based out of Chicago, and I've been with Snyk for about a year now. But my background is in both development and dev tooling. So, at various points in my career, I've been both the guy trying to sell developer tools and also the guy complaining about using them. So, I've definitely seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So next slide, please. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to dive into, why successful developer adoption is so important. Because, let's be honest, if no one's actually using the tools, then it just turns into expensive shelfware. And then we'll look at, why getting developers to adopt these tools and processes can sometimes feel, a bit like, herding cats. And then finally, we'll talk about, how to overcome these challenges by focusing on 3 key areas. That's people, process, and tools. And this isn't really rocket science, but it does require, some strategy, some empathy, and sometimes a little good old-fashioned bribery as well. So let's jump in. Next slide. So let's talk about something that all developers crave, and that's independence. Development teams thrive when they can work in an autonomous way without having to constantly reach out to other groups in the organization. Imagine you're trying to build something awesome, right? And every time you want to deploy it or test it, you need to file a ticket, you need to wait for a response, you need to coordinate with a different team in a potentially different time zone. And that's frustrating, right? It's friction and it kills momentum. Next slide, please. So let's take a walk a little bit down memory lane here. In the traditional approach to security, it was all about silos. Development teams would write the code, they would toss it over the wall to security and kind of just hope for the best. And then security, on the other hand, they worked independently, sometimes just swooping in towards the end of a development cycle, like an unwelcome surprise party. And they'd audit the code, they'd generate a report, they'd drop it back to the developers with a long list of vulnerabilities and no real guidance on what to do next. So what's the result of all that? Well, frustration on both sides. Developers kind of saw security as a blocker, because an obstacle that really slowed down their work. And then security teams felt like they were always stuck playing catch up, just chasing after issues that could have been prevented in the first place. But here's the thing, this traditional approach to security just doesn't cut it anymore. So the shift towards DevOps and now DevSecOps really demands a new way of thinking. And security can't just be this one-off phase. It needs to be integrated into every step of the development process, from the very first line of code on. And this is what we call dev-first security. So instead of being a separate team that swoops in at the end, security kind of becomes this part of the development workflow. So testing, auditing, fixes, these all happen in real time, right alongside the coding. Next slide, please. So let's dive into the elephant in the room here, which is scaling security. And here's the hard truth. No matter how talented your security team is, they can't keep up with the pace of development all on their own. as this quote on the screen puts it perfectly, in a typical organization, you got 100 developers, 10 ops folks, and just one lonely InfoSec person. And let's face it, that's not really a ratio that's going to lead to any kind of success. And then on top of that, with the rise of these generative AI coding assistants, developers are pumping out more code than ever. So the output of those 100 devs today is probably something like the output of 300 devs 5 years ago. And what about the quality of that code? I've seen a few different estimates around here, but something like 40% of all AI generated code has vulnerabilities in it. And that makes sense if you think about it. What are the AI models trained on? Most of the best code in the world, from best developers at companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, that's all in some private repo somewhere behind a firewall, out of the reach of the AI engines. Well, at the same time, my Comp Sci 101 homework from 2006 is probably sitting in a public-facing GitHub that I forgot the password to. And I know that the AI code is getting better and better by the day, but they say right now that an AI code engine is about on the level of a junior developer. Now, imagine this one InfoSec professional trying to juggle the demands from 300 junior developers. It's kind of like asking a single lifeguard to oversee a pool party during spring break. They're overwhelmed, the developers are frustrated, nobody's getting what they want, and then, somebody's probably going to drown. So why does this happen? Well, because without automation and integration, security becomes reactive. So the InfoSec person is stuck in compliance mode, checking boxes instead of doing the proactive work that's really going to keep things safe. And then the developers kind of see security as this blocker, not really as a partner. So it's really just a classic bottleneck. So now what's the solution to this, right? Empowering developers. So the only way to scale security is to integrate it into the daily workflows of your development teams. And instead of relying on a single security expert to catch everything, we really enable developers to take on more of this responsibility themselves. And that doesn't mean turning them into security pros overnight, but it does mean giving them the tools, the processes, and the guidance, and everything they need to handle security effectively. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the main challenges that organizations face when trying to integrate security into the dev process. And they really all boil down to one thing, which is frustration. Next slide, please. So first, there's trust issues. And developers often lose trust in the data, the tooling, or the processes that we give them. And why is that? Because security can be noisy. So think about the alerts that developers receive. They're all, a lot of the time, they're going to be irrelevant, they're going to be overwhelming. They might just be plain confusing. And imagine being told, here's a critical vulnerability. Good luck. Right? It's not clear what line of code to change, what you can change it to, or even if it's something that you can fix at all. And this really creates a lack of confidence in the tools and data, and developers start to see security as more of a blocker. Next slide, please. The next thing is going to be bad tooling. Developers really need these tools that are going to be intuitive and instructive, but a lot of the time they're given tools that are neither. And an alert might tell them, okay, log for shell detected, CVSS 2.0, fixing whatever version. Great, right? Well, not really. Where's the context? Is this in a container? Is this in a base image? Is it a dependency that's 3 levels deep? So without having that actionable information, developers are left doing detective work instead of actually coding. Next slide, please. The next is going to be unclear ownership. And that's really, one of the biggest challenges is figuring out who's responsible for what. Is the platform team in charge of security for the infrastructure? Does the application team handle security for the app? Or does really everyone just assume someone else will take care of it and not really take care of anything themselves? Without these clear roles and responsibilities, these vulnerabilities can slip through the cracks sometimes. And when something does go wrong, it turns into this game of finger pointing, which nobody likes. So now that we've gone over, sorry, next slide. So now that we've really gone over the first 3 there, of course, the lack of skills can be a pretty big challenge as well. Then there's that ultimate challenge, which is time. Developers are already going to be stretched thin just for feature deadlines and product launches. And then adding security tasks onto their plate without giving them extra time and resources, kind of like asking them to juggle flaming torches while riding the user cycle, right? It's not very effective. Something's going to drop. So what's the result of all of this? Well, developers start to see security as a burden, which is, again, something to work around rather than work with. And when that happens, developer adoption stalls. So if we want to solve these challenges, we need to rebuild trust. We need to provide better tools. We need to clarify ownership. And then, we'll talk about how to do that in the next couple sections here. Slide, please. So, all right, let's shift gears here and talk a little bit about people. Because, at the heart of developer adoption, it's not just about the tools and processes. It's about the culture you create. And if we want developers to embrace security, we really need to start by understanding them and, most importantly, building them. So first we have to have an understanding of their appetite for change. Are they a team that loves experimenting with new processes, or are they more set in their ways? If you drop this big sudden change on a team that's already resistant, you're just asking for pushback. So you want to match the pace of change to what the development teams can handle. Next, think about a team and project, think about their maturity. A team that's working on a legacy project might be less willing or able to adopt new practices than ones that are working on this like shiny new application. Similarly, these mature teams with well-established workflows, they might need a different approach than newer teams that are still figuring things out. This project ownership, this is another critical piece. Who actually owns this code? Legacy projects, as you guys I'm sure all know, a lot of the time sometimes become orphaned with no clear team responsible for maintaining them. And if nobody feels that ownership, then you can pretty much bet that security is not going to be prioritized. And then there's the team's capacity, and this might be the single biggest factor. Developers are already juggling, tight deadlines, product demands, sprinkles. If a team is stretched to the limit, asking them to take on, more security work without adjusting their workloads, it's going to be like, squeezing water from a rock, pretty much. And this is ultimately about meeting developers where they are. It's about understanding the pain points that they face every single day. So talk to your developers, ask them what frustrates them about their security, where they see gaps, and what support they need. These discussions, they're not about gathering intel, they're about building relationships. And developers are far more likely to engage with security if they feel heard and understood. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about security champions. And this is really a powerful way to bridge the gap between developers and security. So think of security champions as like the secret agents of secure development, right? They're embedded within their own teams, but they also advocate for better security practices. So it's kind of like having a team member that's fluent in both dev and sec and can help translate between the two worlds. So what is a security champion? Well, it's a developer who dedicates like a small percentage of their time, maybe 10, 20%, to improving the security within their team. So they're still writing code, they're still delivering features and all that, but they're also the go-to person for security. So it's a dev-to-dev approach that really feels collaborative instead of top-down. So why does this work? Well, because developers speak the same language. A security champion can approach their peers with empathy and understanding. So instead of like, hey, here's another process that you guys follow, it's like, here, how can we make this easier and safer? So it's less about enforcement and more about collaboration. Next slide, please. And then let's be honest, everyone loves a little bit of recognition. So whether it's just, a simple shout out in a meeting or a hoodie, rewards and recognition go a long way to motivate developers. So let's start with call-outs. And these can be, as simple as just giving a quick well done during a team meeting or sending out a Slack message that highlights someone's contribution. The key here is making that recognition public. So when you call out a developer or a team for hitting a milestone or adopting a security practice, it sets an example for others. It's not just about showing everyone, about praising that person, it's about showing everyone else that this work matters. Okay? Now here's where it gets even better, and that's kudos from leadership. Recognition obviously hits a little bit differently when it comes from the top. It just sends this clear message, security isn't just a nice to have, but it's a priority for the whole organization. And then of course, since I mentioned bribery earlier, there's swag. Who doesn't love swag? Just like hoodies, stickers, mugs, whatever. It's not about the item itself, it's about what it represents. So it's a badge of honor, kind of says that I'm part of something bigger. Swag also sparks curiosity. Of course, when one developer gets a cool hoodie, the other ones start asking, hey, where'd you get that? And it's that kind of peer-to-peer encouragement that it's really invaluable. So it really creates a sense of community and makes security feel like less of a chore and more like something that developers want to be a part of. And then finally, think beyond physical rewards. Think about training opportunities and career growth. Those can be just as powerful as swag. Sending somebody to a conference like Black Hat or offering advanced security training, it's not just rewarding. It's not just a free trip to Vegas, although it absolutely is that too. It's investing in their future. So, it shows that you value their contributions and you want to help them out. Next slide, please. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into processes. Next slide as well. All right, the golden rule here is make sure you include developers in all process decisions. So here's what you don't do. Of course, you don't roll out a new security requirement on a Monday with zero warning and expect everyone to just kind of fall in line. That's really a surefire way to frustrate developers and have your initiative fail before it even begins. So instead, you want to make the process collaborative. Make sure you bring developers into the conversation early. Share what needs to be achieved, ask for their input on how to make it better. When developers feel included, they're way more likely to engage in the process. Then it's also, again, critical to recognize that not all teams are the same. You got your high performing teams that might embrace changes quickly, and then others might need a little bit more time and guidance. It's kind of the nature of things. Some teams might be working on critical features with like super tight deadlines. Others might have some flexibility. So you want to tailor your approach to the specific needs of each team rather than trying a one-size-all-fits solution. Another key point here is the education and awareness. So don't just drop it on teams with no context. You want to explain why the change is happening, what benefits it brings. So you want to provide training, resources, support, just to make this transition as smooth as possible. And then, of course, the more prepared the teams are, the less pushback they face. And then, of course, the big one, keep it simple. Developers already have enough complexity in their lives, the debugging, the sprint planning, the late night caffeine fixes, all that. The last thing that they need is a security process that's going to disrupt their workflow. So instead, integrate security into their existing tools and processes. So if they're already using Jenkins or pull request checks, put your security tests there. Don't make them go hunting for another tool or dashboard. Next slide, please. Next, let's talk about visibility and transparency. And these are really two things that are absolutely critical when it comes to driving developer adoption. If developers can't see where they stand or what progress they're making, it's like running a race without a finish line. One of the best tools that you can really use to foster this visibility is scorecards. So think of scorecards as like self-assessment tools for these teams. They really help the security champions evaluate their team's own security maturity and posture, and then track their progress, identify any gaps, see what they're doing well, see what they're doing not well. So a scorecard might include some metrics like, how many vulnerabilities are being introduced versus fixed, or how many critical vulns still remain unsolved, things like that. And again, this isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's really about helping teams understand where they are and where they need to be. So it's just to provide actionable insights and not just data. Accountability is another pretty key element that we have here. And really, teams should be accountable for their scorecard results. So again, not in a punitive way. We're not trying to punish anybody, but it's just really a means of driving progress. So, a team sees that they've been introducing more vulnerabilities than they're fixing. It gives them a really clear goal for the next sprint. Transparency across teams is also super valuable. When teams can see how others are performing, it really opens up opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing. So again, it's not about competition between teams, but it's about raising the bar for everyone. But if you do like competition, of course, that's always fun. So you can use some gamification. Some organizations have leaderboards or have challenges between teams, things like that. Just be careful not to overdo it. It's really supposed to motivate, not necessarily create unnecessary pressure. Next slide, please. All right. Next, we'll talk a little bit about rolling out changes. And the key here is to start off small and build up gradually. So first, you want to focus again on the teams that are most likely to adapt quickly. These are going to be your early adopters. And these are the ones, again, that are most willing to change and willing to experiment. So start with them. Learn from their experience, and then use their feedback to refine the process for everybody else. And next, you're going to want to start by prioritizing new code first. And why is that? Well, because new code is easier to manage, it's clean, it's fresh, it's shiny. Developers are already working on it, it's already front of mind for them. So by addressing security in new code, you're really teaching developers to integrate security into their day-to-day workflow without the added burden of tackling these years and years and years of legacy issues. Of course, the obvious exception, if you have these glaring critical vulnerabilities that you need to tackle, take care of those immediately. But really the idea here is just to get developers used to shifting left and help them build that muscle. Then once the team is comfortable with securing new code, then you can start expanding the scope, right? You can start tackling some of the backlog. But again, be careful not to throw everything at developers all at once. It's really about ramping up the guardrails at a pace that the teams can handle. So think of it again like training for a marathon. You're not going to run 10 miles in the first day. You're gonna get burned out, and that's what happens to developers too. So, you're going to want to start out slow and build up. And that's, maybe start with like the critical vulnerabilities that have fixes available, or the ones that are reachable, or whatever. And then gradually start to incorporate all critical vulnerabilities. Then move down to the highs and maybe the medians, right? So this isn't going to be like a one and done process. This is something that takes a long time, months, maybe even years. Next slide, please. All right, next we'll talk a little bit about tooling, because again, no matter how good your strategy is, it's going to fall apart if the tools aren't right. And one of the biggest challenges that we have when we introduce new tooling is the risk of overwhelming developers. So again, imagine you're introducing a tool and you're telling your developers, oh, by the way, that code base that you trusted, well, it has 10,000 issues. So what does the developer even do with that, right? Like, it's paralyzing, could lead to disengagement where they just kind of, I don't know. So that's why it's really critical to introduce tooling gradually. So when you roll out a new tool, don't just, you want to start by just exposing the full scope of vulnerabilities. It's too much to do that. Instead, you want to just kind of use the tool to observe and just see the state of things without demanding immediate action from your teams. Because again, when developers see 10,000 issues flagged, they're going to be like, where do I even start, right? So this is why prioritization is important. So again, rather than showing them everything, focus on what's important to fix today. So, maybe the vulnerabilities that are exploitable or reachable, that are in critical areas of production, or, something with like tied to sensitive data, things like that. And this really helps developers focus on the issues that have the biggest potential impact and really give them clarity and direction. So again, also make sure you celebrate the wins along the way. If you set a goal to address the top 5 vulnerabilities in a sprint, celebrate when you've tackled them. Don't just immediately refresh the list with 5 more. So you want to let the team see their progress. And again, it's far more motivating to feel like you're actually making headway than feel like you're endlessly just spinning your wheels. Next slide, please. All right, next we'll talk about automation. And again, we talked about this in the last presentation, but it's not just a nice to have, it's the backbone of a scalable and effective security program. So when we talk about automation, it's important to embed it into the existing developer workflows. If your team uses Jenkins, integrate that into the pipelines that you're already using. You spend a lot of time in your SCM, GitHub, add automated security tests there as well, as part of the pull request process even. And if your team loves IDE plugins, just make sure that those plugins have automated security functionality. So the goal, again, is to meet developers where they already are, so security feels like a natural extension of their workflow rather than this added burden. And we see this a lot with a tool like Snyk, right? Some organizations will automate everything, their entire lifecycle, scanning the code for vulnerabilities, setting policies to reduce noise, automatically creating Jira tickets or pull requests for fixes, even sometimes auto-merging those fixes if it pass all the tests, right? So a lot of use cases there. Another key point is going to be the data automation. We talked about the scorecards and stuff like that, but manually pulling data from dashboards and generating reports, it's not really just only tedious, but it's also part of being deprioritized when things get busy. So instead, use APIs to pull vulnerability data directly into dashboards or scorecards that your team already uses. So automate all those weekly and monthly reports to show how teams are performing, so you don't have to, always have to think about it manually. Next slide, please. And then finally, I want to highlight the importance of choosing the right tools. So these are the tools that developers actually want to use. Developers instinctively know what makes a good tool. They can spot a tool designed for them versus one that's designed for a security team. And trust me, if the tool doesn't feel right, developers aren't going to use it. So you want to really, again, prioritize tools that feel like an extension of their existing workflow and genuinely make their jobs easier. So what makes a tool developer friendly? So we hear this word a lot. Well, first it needs to integrate seamlessly into their workflows that they already use. They already have their favorite tools, right? Their IDEs, their Git repos, their CI/CD pipelines. The last thing that they want is another dashboard to check, another app to download, another thing to log into, another pane of glass. So meet them where they are. Another important feature is self-serve capability. Developers want tools that are intuitive, ones that have simple onboarding and processes and workflows that they can figure out without hours of training. A tool should offer clear documentation and APIs that make automation and integration easy. And it should be fast, right? Nobody wants to sit around waiting for a tool to churn through data when they're trying to meet a deadline. So you'll want to leverage tools that are already widely adopted in the dev and security communities. Because of course, popular tools are going to have better support, more integrations, and then higher trust among users, more things like user groups, people using them, questions answered online, things like that. You're also going to want to consider tools that cover the whole application stack. So first-party code, third-party libraries, containers, IAC, cloud environments. This really makes sure that security is comprehensive, and that developers don't have to juggle multiple tools just to make sure everything's safe and all the bases are covered. So the unified tool set really just reduces that complexity and helps to improve adoption as well. And then the focus should also be on fixing and remediating issues, not just reporting them. So again, imagine being a developer, getting this list of problems, having no idea where to start. It's frustrating, right? So instead, tools should provide actionable insights. Here's the issue, here's where it is, and here's how to fix it. So some tools, again, like Snyk, can even go a step further by auto-generating fixes or suggesting remediation steps that developers can take to quickly implement. And this, again, ties into the value of AI-enhanced tooling. So a lot of developer tools now include these AI capabilities that could help streamline their workflows, generate code, and even fix vulnerabilities. Like I was mentioning with Snyk, we use AI to identify vulnerabilities, and we also have AI to suggest fixes and fix vulnerabilities. But there's plenty of other opportunities to use AI. Even something just as simple as making your knowledge base searchable with AI, that can go a long way in driving developer adoption. Next slide here. Actually, is there one before that? Oh, yeah, this one. Developer adoption cheat sheet. So this is really the finale. This is basically everything I talked about today all in one cheat sheet. This is available as part of our developer adoption white paper on our website on Speak. And yeah, feel free to check it out. Also, there's you'll see on your table these things that you can scan. It's an event coming up on Valentine's Day. You can read a little bit about it. Please go ahead and sign up. And that is all I have for this presentation.
Any questions? We have 2 minutes.
All right. Nothing. All right.
All right, it's break time. There you go. I don't know if it's that for him or plus it's break time. I don't know. Yeah, so be back in around 10 minutes. It should give you time to do at least 2 laps around the parking lot. Batteries in that? I don't know what the deal is. Good. How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, hopefully you'll get some bites on that, you know, yes. Oh. Go back inside. How you doing? Good to see you again. How you been? Good. Business been good? Picking up? Great. Uh-huh. Very nice. Good. Busy, but good busy, right? Yeah. All right. Can't wait. Thanks, baby. It's looking dark out there. Dark and it is. Hoping we can go out on the patio for happy. I think everybody will stay in the room. Huh? That is out. Yeah, that's the one. That's the outside.
Cover though, right?
Yeah, it's just maybe a little brisker than I thought. We could try it. Hey, Brett. You too. Let's see if this is open.
I don't think I've mentioned, see what's Ricky Howe, the check marks. Rodney, yeah, it's another email. Like, I was figuring out who it's who. So I know Brian Gillespie very well. I know he's been for years. So how's it going? Good. So what do you live? You're in the Brussels? Okay. So I moved to San Antonio from Austin like this. So it's different. It's been awesome 2 years. So you know, it's just really good. Well, it's all our.
Set this here for a minute. Go find out what's holding the food out. It's stupid choppy with the microwave. Works. It's finicky. Okay, is it bad? Do I need to step aside? Yeah, you stay on the side. I can do that. There you go. Makes sense. It does. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Goes down, but down goes forward.
That makes sense.
Totally.
But it kind of up this feels like next. I don't know, I'll go down.
Are you going down the deck?
Right, no, I'm with it. I figured it out. I'm really smart.
That's just the way they designed that, it's going backwards.
How long will it break?
10 minutes.
Coming up on.
My God, I did it again. I don't want to be a fool. How do I get out? Yeah. Here's where. Is it down here? Yeah. This way.
Yes.
It's not sharing. You have to get out in slideshow. I go back to the same. That's a whole.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like that. No, sharing normal screen. Yeah. No. What's it sharing? Huh?
That's what it was saying. The camera.
The broad share. Share the full share. Right? What? Communicate, I can help.
So when you present in, so SharePoint basically takes a whole new presentation screen.
Yeah.
And if you're not sharing that on the screen, Zoom's not going to see it. It's and I hate that it does that.
Yeah.
So. We got 2 more minutes. Screen 2. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it is sharing.
There you go.
And then then I saw one of the responses from that. Well, yeah. Oh shit, I don't know how to do that. So the development sent it to them out. And so it's like, replace that. And we can do anything. So if you go with the instructions, you're gonna have all of the.
We mainly focus on static.
That's why I think it's not.
That's why you gotta pick like good quality. I know.
Yeah, another thing. I think it's a good question. The lights on the screen, you can't hardly read the screen. Yeah, I couldn't read it.
Really?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming down.
I don't know if it's fixable, but maybe they bring the lights towards me on the screen. It's up to you. I couldn't read it. It's so sweet. You really don't need to see my face. That is not the important thing here. This is not the motivator. This is that's probably better.
Okay, everybody. 2-minute warning, then we're going to get started.
Oh, all right. Oh,
You
really?
get a bite of this before I stand up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've had this before. It's my favorite here. The other
Yeah.
thing that's really good here is the piccata, like if you get the shrimp piccata or the
Thank you.
oh, gosh.
It'll be last part.
Let's find out.
My son was going to study abroad.
It says 100%. It's 100% fucked.
It's wonderful. I'm going back out there doing a Mediterranean cruise. That's coming up in May.
Oh, is that
Yeah,
my last
I'm gonna go to
slide?
Venice.
That's my last slide.
Turkey,
Go to my first slide.
Greece, and go back
Oh, wait, maybe I can
up
do
through
it.
Italy and Rome and cities on the other side.
The one that
then
says "Ask Me Anything" is like the last.
France, French Riviera, and then end up in Spain and Barcelona. It's like a bucket list trip.
Yeah.
Almost
Uh-oh.
3.
Oh wow. All right. Well, I'm just gonna go like this, but it's good. Oh, is it infrared? That's what IR stands for. Hold on. Let's just turn it a little bit like this. Direct line of sight.
Yeah, I haven't done Naples yet either. We're gonna hit Naples on the cruise, so
National Park in called Hercules. You know about Tom disaster of volcanoes? When that occurred, archaeological. So Hercules
I am.
in better shape than Tom.
Right. Perfect. Oh, so I can like walk right up to the crowd. Like, I'm gonna do that. I don't care. I gave a talk in front of 3,000 people at RSA, and they had these like it was 3 auditoriums together, like one there, one here, and one over there, and a big screen like 50 feet tall in front of each crowd. Like so, one's
what's
behind
on the
me,
scroll?
one's over here, one's over here, and I blacked out. Like I don't remember a single thing from the whole talk. Like I'm sure I did it. I seen a video of it, but like I don't remember doing it. It's weird.
Wow.
6'9", something like that. Yeah. Jeffrey, tilt the camera up.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I have a degree
So?
on my team. My degree is in anthropology.
Play basketball? No.
It's like
Gotcha.
what's interesting about it, my cultural aspect. They were still discussing basically diaries, like stories, these scrolls, and the same things they were talking about. We contemplate today in life. They were contemplating back then.
It feels like a lot longer than a 10-minute break.
That's crazy. Yes. Where is oh you're there. Okay, I was just looking over there for you.
We had to debug the clicker
Did you get it
situation.
working?
Yeah, you got to be able to see it. Like it's got to be like
Yeah.
it's infrared, not Wi-Fi.
Oh, we got to get a Wi-Fi
not
one.
Bluetooth.
We're gonna get a Wi-Fi one.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna introduce you, Jeff. Okay, everybody. We're going to get started here. Hello. Hello. All right, so we're going to get started here. I'd like to introduce Jeff Williams. Again, he's the founder and CTO for Contrast and also the founder for OWASP. So let's give him a hand. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. So you guys like me so much that you gave me the coveted while everyone is eating spot to talk. So I'm really excited about that. I'm actually a little worn out. In those first two talks, we went through, I counted about 50 different practices that you can do to help build an AppSec program. Just kind of overwhelming. You guys, do you feel overwhelmed about AppSec? Anyone feel that way? Like that was a lot of shit to do. So, yeah, I got into AppSec in the late 1990s. I got involved with OWASP, wrote the top 10 and a bunch of other projects you may have used, WebGoat and some others. I love participating in OWASP. It's given me far more than I've contributed to it, actually. And I'm super psyched. Last year, I started a project as part of Cyclone DX to make machine-readable attestations for it's under the CISA program. And yesterday, the new executive order came out requiring machine-readable attestations. I was like, holy shit, I just made a difference, maybe. Like, that's kind of cool. So I love that you guys are participating in OWASP. There's nothing better for your career than getting involved and contributing to OWASP. So thank you for coming and being part of this chapter. This is really exciting to me. I started the first chapter at OWASP, like 2002, something like that. And so it's really exciting to see big chapters growing. Today, I'm going to challenge you. This is ironically for a meeting about shifting left. I am going to talk about what happens to the right. And I want you to think about whether we're succeeding at AppSec. I wrote the OWASP Top 10 in 2002, and it's still basically the same stuff. And frankly, nothing has changed in AppSec. We had static and dynamic tools, and then we had processes and maturity programs and a crap load of practices back in the 2000s. And not much has really changed. And frankly, I don't think we're very effective at AppSec. There may be some programs that have kind of brute forced their way into a good program. But, as Vipul talked about, it's probably going to take a decade or more to build a program like that with a lot of work and a lot of people and a lot of cost. And that's not feasible for most companies. So let me get into my slides here a little bit before we get wasted the whole time. Line of sight. Okay. So I want you to think about, well, have you guys ever seen a talk where the speaker says, like AppSec is like securing a house and you got to lock the doors and, close the windows and, put in a bunch of security products and that's how you secure things. AppSec is way more complex than that. I want you to think about the application layer in a typical large enterprise. We're talking about hundreds or thousands of applications. Each app has dozens of repos, hundreds of libraries, tons of APIs, connections, services, containers. And they're constantly changing. In many organizations, it's billions of lines of code, constantly changing. And it's going to get a lot worse, as I think both our speakers pointed out. Now we've got AI writing code. So like developer productivity up like 40%. Well, that means 40% more AppSec work, right? Like tomorrow. And how do we adjust to that? So it's not like a house. AppSec is more like securing a city. You can't see everything that's going on. How do you secure a city? The crimes could be happening anywhere. I think like the Italian job, right? Like anywhere, underwater, so we need to figure out how we're going to deal with AppSec at this massive scale. So I call this your application security layer. Okay, think of all the code that you're running across your enterprise that you've bet your company on. And I'm talking about, this is the code that we all trust with everything that's important in our lives. Our finances, our healthcare, our economy, our government, our defense, even our social life. It's all controlled by the code that we're talking about here. That's why I'm so passionate about AppSec, is it's incredibly important, and quite frankly, we suck at it. So here's some of the reasons. It's really what I think about. It's like the fog of war. Like, you can't really see what's going on in your application layer. The tools are very fragmented. Like, we have one tool to analyze the source code and another tool to analyze the libraries. That's stupid from the get-go. That it's one thing. It's the application. We have a tool that analyzes from the outside and bangs on applications. We've got tools in production that help try to stop attacks. They all see a piece of the puzzle, but none of them have nearly enough context. They're pretty inaccurate. Anybody dealt with false positives and theoretical findings? It's a huge waste of time. When we look at it, about 5% of the findings that come out of tools represent actual serious risks that are exploitable in production. And it's not that they're wrong. Like, it might be a library with a vulnerability, but is it actually used in the running application? Is it actually exploitable with the configuration that's there? Does it process PII? Like, those kinds of considerations mean those findings are actually wrong. They're false positives. Even though they're true positives according to what we see on the left, they're not true on the right. And so there's just all these reasons why the tools that we're using to try to gain visibility aren't giving us what we want. Test environments are not the same as production. Anybody got a test environment that's an exact replica of production? No, nobody does. It's really difficult. We don't use threat intelligence in rating risks, for instance. Like, you don't know, like, hey, that vulnerability is currently being attacked in another application that we own. If that was true, the risk would go up. But our risk scores, like, I guarantee static tools, if they find static analysis, it's higher or critical, depending on how you think about it. Always. But it's not. What if that path through the application is only accessible by admins? And it only allows somebody to access information that's public. It's not a critical. It's not even an info, really. So this is kind of the problem with the approach that we're taking to AppSec now. And I'm going to try and challenge you to think, could it be different? Why are we so wedded to these, quote, best practices, like the ones in OpenSAM and the NIST SSDF and all the other maturity models that are out there? Why are we so wedded to those practices? They're not really working, and they're very expensive. There are some clues to a better solution, by the way. The first is every other layer of the stack. We do security by adding an agent to that layer of the stack and analyzing the runtime behavior of that piece in production. So, EDR, CDR, all the whole XDR ecosystem. We're watching code run in production to gain that intelligence, not analyzing the ingredients. By the way, even if you secure all the ingredients, it doesn't mean you're going to make a great meal. I can personally attest that having great ingredients does not guarantee a good meal that you produced. The other clue is AppSec is kind of clamoring for things like KEVs, the known exploited vulnerabilities, in order to get better contextual risk ratings, right? If it's known exploited, whoa, we better take care of that right away. Also, things like, I've heard exploitability and reachability a couple times today already. Like, I didn't hear blast radius, but that's another kind of term that is useful. If you want to understand the real risk of something, you got to understand, like, what really bad could happen in production if it got exploited. Anybody know what's the direction here? What do these two clues tell us about where the answers are? Anybody? It's not to the left It's in production. All the answers that we seek are in production. Everything you want to know about security, blast radius, exploitability, context, everything you want to know, threat intelligence, it's all in production. If you look, you can see the difference. In production, we've got fully assembled apps and APIs, not ingredients, but meals. And we get how they're connected to all the other applications for blast radius, real users, real data. All that code is running in production. We can see exactly what runs and what doesn't. It's a real environment, real code behavior, and real attackers and real exploits. Everything's real. This is all simulated and fake and incomplete. So our picture of AppSec is incomplete. That's why everything is so hard. So the question is, how do we got a city, right? How do we get that information out of production so that we can make smarter, better, faster decisions, right? So the first step is we're going to instrument the city with sensors. So actual real cities are doing this. I got online and I found some maps of cameras in cities. It's insane. Even in the US, cameras everywhere. But I want you to imagine instrumenting your application layer, all of it, so that everything's instrumented. All your access to databases, your XML parser, your attack surface, your assets, your connections. We want to be able to see all that stuff, and it's not hard. We can instrument this layer to find all these things. And then, so then the question is, okay, so what do we do with it? We take that telemetry and we build what I'll call an AppSec graph. This is a model of everything that matters to application security in your enterprise. So you can see the kinds of things that we can, I don't know if you guys in the back can read this. It says things like where all your apps and APIs are, where your servers are, assets, attack surface, vulnerabilities, attacks, CVEs, data flow, libraries, threat intel. Everything that you care about, we can measure it in production and build a model of that. The fidelity of this model is what allows you to do really efficient AppSec. You could try to build this model using static tools and SCA tools and dynamic tools, but nothing would connect together. Anybody ever tried to correlate SAST and DAST findings? It's a shit show because you just don't have enough information. One has lines of code in it and the other has an HTTP request in it. Like, how do you make it go? So this approach is all connected. The HTTP is connected to the code, is connected to the assets on the back end. It's all, so you can observe it all. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So I can hear your brains from here screaming like, hold up, Jeff. I'm trying to find vulnerabilities in development before they get to production. And you're telling me to wait to production? Are you crazy? And I'm telling you, yeah, that's exactly what I want you to do is wait until things get into production. Here's why. This is like Gartner's model of like their maturity model for stuff. Tons of products and it doesn't work very well. I want to clear all this stuff off and start over. So this is simple development process. We really want to do two things. In fact, all this stuff on this other slide, all this stuff, it really accomplishes two things. Find vulnerabilities, stop attacks. If you're doing that effectively, you've got an AppSec program. And so all this stuff is nobody can succeed with this. It's too complicated and too expensive. So I want to make it simpler. So first thing I want to do is I want to switch, verify, and prevent. We want to verify in production. That's where we have all the context to make things not only accurate, but real. Like we know it's real exploitable, real vulnerability, really reachable, and so on. It's easy in production because we know we'll see it happen. And prevent, we want to prevent attacks in development. This is when we want to fix vulnerabilities so that they can't be exploited. So it's a circle. It doesn't really matter. Like this should be iterating pretty quickly anyway. So that shifting left is kind of a dumb concept from the get-go because it is a circle. There's no left on a circle. But so here's what I want to do. enable ADR. The approach that I just described, instrumenting production, that's called ADR, application, detection, and response. And it's detection and response of attacks like EDR and SDR and so on, but it's also detection and response of vulnerabilities. So we're going to detect all that stuff in development, in production, and build this graph. Then we're going to use that graph in the rest of this cycle. The graph is easy to generate. There's no real work once you instrument the applications. And I'll tell a little story about that in a second. Graph builds automatically. Nobody really needs to know that it's being built. It's just happening automatically. And then this information can inform all the activities that you want to do, but it's much simpler now. We're going to detect attacks and respond to them automatically. If somebody tries to exploit a SQL injection, we'll stop it. We're going to test for vulnerabilities. We'll find all the vulnerabilities here, not really testing, just like finding them automatically. And by the way, you can find vulnerabilities passively. You don't have to actually exploit a vulnerability in order to find it. You can just see it. So this is all passive generation. It's not a performance impact. You'll just get your vulnerabilities. Then you can get them to the people that need to see them really quickly. Now, the average MTTR, and why I asked this question earlier, the average MTTR for vulnerabilities found with static. Anybody got a guess? Cam? Hello? No, it's 290 days. It's like 3 quarters. And by the way, the average backlog in companies, the other question I asked, average backlog, according to Ponemon, is 1.1 million vulnerabilities just from apps and APIs in big enterprises. That's crazy. That's not working, right? So we want to get fast feedback. That's, by the way, that's the bar. That's what we got to beat, is 1.1 million in the backlog and 290 days to remediate. That's the bar. It's pretty low. So let's get the vulnerabilities back to folks quickly. And we can use this. I'm a big fan of threat modeling, but nobody really does it effectively because it's so manually intensive. And the big part of the work is going to gather all the damn data. Like, what does that application do? How does it work? Give me a diagram and all that. We can automate that. We can't automate the threat modeling because that's actually like, really challenging security work. But we can get all the work. This is most of it is just gathering what reality looks like. So we can get a blueprint of every single workload and how it works. Then the threat modelers can go to town and say, hey, you're missing authentication and access control on these routes. That's the kind of stuff that really threat modeling can do for you. So this is the approach. And I can hear you again screaming in your brains. I can hear it just emanating from the crowd, like, Jeff, we're not going to test in production. No way anybody's going to allow me to do that. And I'm telling you, you've got to convince them that it's a bigger risk to not test in production. They're worried about testing in production because they're worried about the impact on production systems. And there's really not a lot of risk to that, to adding an agent, an ADR agent. And I'm not just talking about contrast here. There's a bunch of ADR companies. Adding that agent to production is low risk, but not using it is massive risk, because I guarantee you, you're missing tons of attacks in production if all you've got is a WAF. You're not seeing things. I'll give you an example in just a second of how that happens. But I like this quote from this guy at Infinite Campus. He said, if you're afraid to test in production, remember that your customers are already testing in production all the time. Let's take advantage of that. Like, let's observe what they're doing and gain the wisdom of whatever they're doing, attacking and so on. David Wilson at Fidelity, they deployed APM tools. They had them in development, and they were trying to improve production. And that was fine. It was expensive. They did a lot of work. They moved it to production. And the issue resolution time went from 4 to 6 weeks to 4 to 6 minutes because now they're dealing with reality. The data they're looking at was real. It's real production data. It's not some simulation that they had to challenge and second guess and verify and decide whether it's theoretical or not realistic. They got real production data that says, hey, that database query is taking way too long. Let's go fix it. And so they can focus on what's real. That 5% of what's really real, that's where you want to spend your effort. The other 95% of theoretical, irrelevant stuff, don't worry about it. So that's exciting to me. Let me tell you a little absolutely true story of a real company that got really attacked and almost exploited that I just made up. This company deployed ADR last year. They pushed it out with a Kubernetes operator to all their systems. So easily deployed. They started getting data. And then just a few days ago, they got attacked with an unsafe deserialization attack. The attacker found an API deep in their organization and was able to send requests to it. They figured out how to send a deserialization attack. And those attacks are serious. If an attacker can get your app to deserialize a malicious object, then they can run arbitrary code. They could steal all your source, all your code. They can steal credentials. They can launch attacks from your platform. They can do whatever they want. So it's serious. WAFs can't see it because the attack is buried inside a serialized object on the wire. So it's invisible to WAF. And EDR tools can't see it because the attack is starting in the application layer. It doesn't hit the kernel. So really dangerous. Fortunately, ADR instruments all the serialization libraries. Like if you think of the city, like there's a building that does deserialization, we got cameras in it, and we're watching the deserialization process, and we can see, hey, this deserialization is doing some crazy stuff. It's accessing files, it's starting native processes, it's doing bad stuff. So we can prevent that attack. And so they received, so we detected the issue and the incident under process. That went to operations so they could respond instantly. Operations gets a detailed incident that has, what happened, the context of it. It'll show the exact route, like the blast radius, all the details of this incident. And in the meantime, every significant exploit has a vulnerability associated with it. So we might as well tell development about that vulnerability and get them working on fixing the underlying problem. Like operations might decide to block requests from that IP address, fine, stop the attack. Development needs to fix the underlying deserialization problem. They can work together now. Does anybody have an operations team that when they discover an AppSec attack, they work closely with development to get it fixed? It would surprise me. AppSec is split right down the middle. There's like the wall of China separating pre-production AppSec work, which is almost everything we've talked about today so far, and production application security work, which is mostly WAF. There's no coordination. The operations teams are terrified of AppSec because they don't know much about it. They ignore the WAF logs. Most organizations that I talk to, their WAF is not blocking, and they're not reviewing the output from it. It might go into their SIM, but nobody's like looking for problems in that. So this would be a happy ending, except that it's not what happened. 200 days before that attacker found the vulnerability and started attacking it, just by using the application in production, this team discovered the vulnerability themselves. It was initially rated a medium. But then they noticed, hey, in some other applications in our enterprise, we see some deserialization attacks happening. So the risk of this vulnerability was escalated up to medium, up to high. And the development team got notified of a new high vulnerability. And they said, hey, you know what, we're going to fix it. So 200 days ago, they fixed it before they ever got attacked. Now that's an excellent story, except that's not what happened either. What really happened was 250 days ago, the ADR detected a library in production that has a known vulnerability. And it detected that that library is actually in use. I don't know if you know this, but 68% of open source libraries are never used in production. They never even load into memory. Those libraries are not critical vulnerabilities. Even if they've got 10 CVSS score vulnerabilities in them, they're never run. They're not a problem. So this one they discovered, hey, this library, this unsafe, this deserialization library has a vulnerability in it. And they updated this library because it too got updated because they saw attacks on deserialization. So now it's a high vulnerability. They customized their CVSS score for this high vulnerability, and they fixed it, and none of this other stuff have to happen. They saved all this downstream work and fuss because they did the right thing early on, because they had visibility into it. Okay. This is not made up data. This is actual data from December that I want to report to you from, just checking my time. How are we doing on time? Perfect. Great. This is real data, and I want to talk about the context. So ADR sees this on a per app, per month basis. So every app that's running, ADR sees 426 million different events. This is calls to calls to XML parsers and file accesses and encryption operations and everything that you care about with security. We're seeing huge numbers of these calls. A subset of those are interesting enough to add to the graph. And we see a ton of what I'm calling non-viable attacks. We call them probes. Like if somebody sends a path traversal attack to your application and it doesn't go anywhere near the file system, then who cares? It's like throwing a tennis ball against a brick wall. You want to focus on the real attacks, the viable attacks. These are the ones that actually reach a vulnerability, their corresponding vulnerability. And so that's all context. What matters is a few new code vulnerabilities, a few new CVEs, and incidents like these viable attacks are generally part of an incident, all from one attacker or combined, correlated in some way. So this is what you have to deal with on a monthly basis. This is what's real. These are the kind of numbers you get out of other kind of tools that don't have context. So when you have the context, these numbers go way down. And by the way, after a year of using ADR, these numbers go way down because your new code vulnerabilities are going to get prevented, just like the story I just told, because there's learning. Okay, some nice quote from Katie Norton at IDC. Application detection and response, ADR, is a fast-growing category. There's a bunch of companies in this space. Some are new, some are a little older, like Contrast. And there's actually several different approaches to doing ADR. Some instrument the applications directly, some instrument the kernel, some instruments, well, they use the instrumentation from APM tools and try to like glom onto that data. And there's even some WAF companies that are trying to say that now they're ADR, which is that's a bit of a stretch for me. But I think you should evaluate it. This is really important if you want to have a viable application security strategy. So check it out. Pick a vendor, evaluate them, see the benefits of ADR. I think it's crazy that people are deploying applications on the internet without ADR. It's that important because there really is no other good way to see who's attacking you and what kind of attacks they're sending and actually stop those attacks. So that's ADR. I'll be around for a little while after the meal, and you can talk to my colleague Mike Gang is here. Where's Mike's right there, and look forward to talking to you about this. Now we got a couple of minutes for questions, and you can make it on anything you want, anything about AppSec. I'll try and handle it. Cam, what do you think? Cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you see the future for ADR and AI, and what manual skills for humans that are want to get in the field should be picking up on?
That's a great question. So how's AI going to affect this story? To me, what's important, and I think one of the other speakers touched on this, is that AI depends on great data. If you have great, accurate data, you can do really interesting things with AI. If you've got super noisy data, then AI doesn't really help you very much. And so I'm very excited about the fact that ADR can capture all the things that are relevant to AppSec in a very accurate way, because we're directly watching the running applications and APIs. That's important. Then AI can do interesting things with the data. And so I think there's a nice 1 + 1 = 3 there. I would look for AI to do things that help users use the data more effectively. So, create a great write-up for the finding, or create a PR directly from the findings, help navigate the runbook in the context of this particular attack. Those kinds of things are where AI can really shine. Yes.
So how is that ADR tool able to like hydrate like new emerging threats to make sure that it's on, I guess has more of that context to make sure that it actually can like, react to these like emerging threats that again are like happening quite, faster than anyone can really think about.
Yeah, the thing is, they're really not. So the last, like over the past 5 years or so, there've been like a few new categories of application risk that really matter. Unsafe deserialization, expression language injection. There's a few others that have kind of come up. There's usually like maybe one a year, one every other year, something like that. But ADR focuses on whole classes of attacks and vulnerabilities. It's not like signatures for individual vulnerabilities. It's whole classes of vulnerabilities. And so, like, I just saw a finding this morning where my company's product, Contrast, discovered a vulnerability in a APM tool because our customer was using it as part of their application. You'd never find that with a static or dynamic tool. Like, there's just no way to see it. But because ADR is inside it, we can uncover those kinds of vulnerabilities and make sure we get the right protections in place. So it doesn't have to move that fast if you're not trying to keep up with the latest signature. Focus on categories of attacks. Yes.
Yeah, we had an online question.
Yeah, please.
Obvious question is, since you're talking about ADR, what are some of the products out there for that? Who are some of the manufacturers or solution providers for that?
I'm going to encourage people to go. Obviously, Contrast does that. I'm going to encourage them to do a search online. There's a few vendors that offer some flavor of ADR. Some focus on libraries. Some focus on the whole custom code. There's a variety of companies out there, and choose the one that works for you, that fills in the gap in your program. I don't care, but do it because it's important. Yeah, there's one behind you.
So something that you said there that kind of caught my attention was instrument everything, right?
Yeah.
So I guess context, I used to work for Sualogic and New Relic, so I have a lot of background with telemetry data.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pushback that we get, especially in Sualogic on the SIM side, was they can't instrument everything, whether for budgetary or resource constraints. So I'm just kind of curious kind of how you would like approach that, where it's like, is it really you need to instrument everything, or can you still get the value out of ADR from just filling in some gaps rather than the whole picture, if that makes sense?
I mean, first I'd say like maybe your pricing model was wrong. If customers can't afford to, I mean, like I want my customers to instrument all of their application layer infrastructure because that's when the real value comes. I agree. You can get half the value if you instrument half the enterprise, but you're going to miss a big chunk of the picture. And a lot of the big breaches that we've seen are not through like the main most critical applications. They're through the HVAC contractor or whatever, like this, or a billing system or things like that. Like it's not always through the front door. So I mean, it's literally like cameras in the city. Like you're not going to see crime in places where you don't put cameras. So
Yeah, no, it's flashbacks to the conversation I used to have with customers all the time. Hey, why didn't you detect this? And it's like, well, why didn't you put this data? I don't know, just an interesting kind of nuanced conversation. I just want to kind of hear thoughts.
yeah. Question.
Hey, Jeff, so you talked about prevention and, finding the crime as it occurs. So we get rid of the prevention initially over here on lab, right?
So we're not fixing vulnerabilities?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
We're not preventing them over here. We're waiting to find them over on the production side, right?
Yes.
Right. We're waiting to find them.
Well, to be fair, like that might be a few minutes later, right? Like the developer might make a mistake, commit it, push that code, it gets into production. If it happens faster than 290 days, it's a win, right?
Right. So my question is, how do you know, how reliable is it if we do that in terms of, how do I know you're not going to miss something on the right side, right?
Oh yeah, you're much more likely to miss it on the left side, because on the left side, the further left you go, the less context you have and the more mistakes you're going to make. You're going to generate more false positives and have more false negatives. The farther you go to the right, the more context you have, the more accurate you can be, and the more you can focus on things that actually matter. Like you can be 100% accurate here and you'll have a bunch of lows. In fact, when you start taking threat information into account in your risk ratings, they'll mostly go down. Most of the risk rating schemes assume the worst. They assume that the attacker has automated the exploit and that there's tools to find the vulnerabilities. It's when you actually get real data from production and you know that nobody's been targeting that vulnerability, the risk goes down. So you can eliminate a lot of things that don't matter as much and focus on the things that really matter. I mean, there's really instrumentations either kind of like on or off, right? Like you put it on an app or an API and it's going to do its job, or it's not there. And you could say the same thing about static or dynamic or anything else. Like if you don't run it on that app, then you're not going to have visibility into that app. I'm just saying it's easier and better to get that visibility in production.
So where I'm going with it, that you're implementing a lot of left side right now. Are you recommending just shut those off and turn this on? Or are you recommending some kind of, okay, let's prove this out, let this run for a while, and eventually figure out what we're going to shut down over here?
Yeah, I think I mean, a lot of companies have existing processes for SAST and they're kind of used to that. But as you see the effectiveness of ADR, then you can start to dial back on the efforts on your SAST because it's not that important. I would use the ADR results to streamline the SAST results and say, hey, you know what, we got a lot of stuff that doesn't matter over here. Let's cross those out. And eventually, maybe you get rid of SAST, maybe you don't. Some teams kind of like it. They want a little check up front. That's fine. If it works for you, that's cool. Great. Yeah. There's a question in the back there. Hmm. That's a great question. I mean, it's certainly way beyond the state of the art now, but I think the answer is you gather a whole ton of really accurate data and then you make predictive models out of it. And, if we have data from, hundreds or thousands of companies, then you can start to make predictions about what other companies will start to see. I know we're out of time, so I'm just going to stop. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
We go to the next slide. We need to get to the next presentation. Here we go. That's it. So I'd like to introduce Adrian Acuna, CheckMarx, designed for security and quality.
Thanks. Hello, San Antonio. Yeah. Whoa. Shot. Well,
Okay. So first, thanks for inviting me to speak. Appreciate it. I'm not a senior consultant. I'm a health engineer. We'll come to that. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is Adrian, and I just want to let you know right now. We'll get to this quick. I have two happy hour tickets burning a hole in my pocket. I'm trying to get this just like the rest. Good. I have my notes here.
Do you have a mic?
I have a mic now. Can you hear me now? Okay. Hello, web. All right. So first things first, I'm not going to challenge you guys. All here for shift left, we're going to stick with that. But I do agree with Jeff in a lot of ways. He has a very good point about ADR. That's very important. And work with a lot of clients that do protection in production. That's important. So I wouldn't at all, run away from that. Absolutely add it. The other thing is, who am I? I am Adrian Acuna. I'm a senior sales engineer with CheckMarx. Some of you may know CheckMarx. Some of you may not know CheckMarx. It's a legacy product, been around for a while. We do static analysis. We're a SaaS provider. Source and source code. On top of that, now we do pretty much everything else along the board with application security. So for those who don't know what a sales engineer is, it's basically tech support for sales. That's how I tell my children. So if you don't know, that's what I do. So my job is really just to go in and talk about the product and the platform. Now, CheckMarx really focuses on, static analysis, development testing, and production, et cetera, going forward. But what I'm here to talk about is a bit different. I'm going to talk about, Jeff talked about the far right. I'm going to talk about the far left. All right. So what's the furthest left you go in DevOps? Anybody know by chance? Requirements. Yes, requirements. Requirements and planning. That's the first thing. And hats off to Vipul for his presentation. He talked a lot about it and he brought it up multiple times, which is good. A lot of companies that I work with don't really think about it. They come to us and ask us, hey, we're just starting an AppSec program. We've figured static analysis, SCA, that's one to start at. And I have to push back, like, those are good, important tools. You absolutely should have them as a tool set. But you need to go beyond that and actually look further back into planning, right? How do we start? Where do we begin? How do we get to an application being developed? So, well, let's go back to my notes here. So this presentation is really going to be focused on planning, requirements gathering. Who do we involve? How do we involve it? When do we get there? Security is kind of the biggest first thing. So that's next slide. Oh, thanks. Volkswagen. Anybody heard of this company? Raise your hand. Heard of Volkswagen? Okay, most of us. Great. So has anybody heard of this particular headline? Have you seen it? Anybody? Yeah, a couple, 2, 3. So this has been Volkswagen's Christmas present last year, or New Year's present, however you want to celebrate it. Right. So this recently came out. 800,000 EVs. Now Volkswagen is a conglomerate. They have Volkswagen. They have, what is it? Seat and Skoda. Skoda I've seen. I've never heard of Seat. Also 2 other car manufacturers. So this affects multiple platforms, multiple vehicles, multiple customers, multiple consumers. This is an important thing because when we look at what happened here, when they try and go back and figure out how this data got breached, it probably comes a lot down to planning. What happened in the planning stage? So if you don't know, let me give you some statistics. So 800,000, as you can see here, okay, if you can't see, it's pretty light, but 800,000, almost 1 million different EVs. But anybody have an EV here? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, a couple. You should get one. It's fantastic. Love it. All right. Anyway, anyone with EV, so particularly with Volkswagen, they came with EVs and they put software on them, right? It's pretty much a computer on wheels. That's pretty much all EVs are. Super simple, straightforward. But the problem is they leaked their data, 800,000. They leaked civilians, they leaked politicians, they leaked military, they leaked security personnel, regular consumers, just everybody that's in there. And that's a lot. And it's important. And it affects not just regular everyday person, but it affects how countries, how Americans, how Europe, whoever else is using those vehicles, where they are protected, where they're not protected. The information that was leaked was their names, right? Typical of a data breach, phone numbers, email addresses,
And then more importantly, their precise location. Absolutely, the location of every single one of those vehicles. Whether that vehicle was on or off, how fast it was going, where it was going, the direction it was traveling. All this information was stored on this publicly open database. We'll get to that in a second. But that's a big problem. So this probably could have been prevented from the planning stage. Right? So we will talk about it as we go through, but this is a serious vulnerability that came out. It wasn't a vulnerability. It was fine. I mean, probably infrastructure as code scanning probably could have picked it up maybe because it was in an environment and the database wasn't really protected with authentication properly. It's kind of open out there. To Volkswagen's credit, they said, oh, well, you had to be really smart, really technical to get the data. Who cares? Data was still there. It doesn't matter how hard it was. Somebody really wanted to get to it, they will get it, right? So, and that's a big problem. So the other aspect of it, as I mentioned before, precise location. In the terms of service for Volkswagen, they said, we're only storing your location within 5 kilometers, which is like, I don't know, 3 miles, 10 miles, I don't know. I don't know what the, I can't do the conversion. I'm not good at that. Nobody uses kilometers anyway, so. So, yeah, exactly. Freedom units all the way. So, but the point is, what they really stored was down to like 5 meters, like very, very precise. And the users didn't know. That wasn't in terms of service. So clearly there was a lack of communication, as Vipul mentioned earlier, communication. We'll come back to that again in the future. So these are very serious issues. These are very serious problems that we can have if you don't do proper planning. So that's what this discussion is going to be about. It's going to focus on not scanning in production, not scanning in development, not the IDE or developer's experience. We're going to talk about how do we plan, what do we do, what do we think about, when do we get security involved? There's so many companies that are developing a product that think, hey, we're going to develop this box, we're going to develop this car, whatever it is, and then say, well, we'll bring a security when we think we need to protect it. But that's not right. We'll come to that. All right, next slide. All right, so shift left begins with design and thinking, right? So that's the biggest first item. Let me get to the right notes here. So a couple things to look at, right? So user stories. And you mentioned user stories in your presentation, which are important. They are important to look at. You know, understand what is the user doing? What does the user expect? How do they authenticate to the vehicle? In this, in Volkswagen case, how do they authenticate? What data is going up there? What do they expect as a consumer to be allowed and not allowed to share and to be stored? And how is it going to be accessed? And then when it comes to the product, you know, what is Volkswagen going to do with that data? You know, these are aspects you have to think about. And security could have come in and said, okay, well, we're going to store that data. We need to know like GDPR, things like that, because it's personal information, you know, or things like that. We have to protect the data as we go through. So this is why, again, design and planning is to make sure that we always analyze these use cases, analyze these user stories, figure out what they're doing from an early standpoint, from the very beginning. Make sure that we protect from the very beginning, from the start, from the first time somebody's writing down pen and paper.
When you say we analyze the use cases, who do you mean by we?
Security. I'm sorry, the question. Yes, security. Security is coming in the beginning. We'll come down to more. But yes, involves security at the beginning. So we are all security champions here. We're all in charge of security. We're all here because we're part of a security group. So we want to make sure that we understand what is being used, when it's being used, and why it's being used. Next question. So you see S3 here. Now, Volkswagen got hacked. You want to call it hacked? Because they had a cloud storage with AWS that was just essentially out in the open, wide open, right? So it's not it's a misconfiguration for sure, but it's not like it was malicious code. It's not like it was somebody wrote a cross-site scripting vulnerability. So like static analysis wouldn't have figured it out. IAC might have figured it out, depending on the situation. Could have been like the credentials were stored somewhere. They didn't really come clean exactly what happened. The point is the data was unprotected. It was just out there for anybody to grab. So we want to understand that when we look at a design, look at application, you know, go with the principle of least privilege. You know, make sure we look at who has access to the data, when can they access it, how much of the data can they access, which credentials are required, are credentials required, because they should be required. Right? We expect that from any application that has a data storage. So those are kind of the things. Data minimization, make sure that we minimize as much data as possible. and defense in depth. Make sure we have different multiple layers of defense protection for that application. I'm not going to read them all, but you get an idea, you get a sense. You got to make sure that we understand from a design perspective, what are we doing with the application, and apply these principles to that. These are kind of the most basic principles. You can come up with more. Every organization has their own security requirements. They may be like HIPAA, maybe PCI. You have to figure that out for your organizations. But that's the biggest thing, is make sure you're early in the adoption or early in the development phase, early as possible, to make sure these are all understood by the development team, by the development product managers. They know, because they may not think about it. A lot of times people, again, they want to design a product and they'll bring in security as they think they need it, but that's the wrong opinion. Next. All right, so this is designed for quality attributes, right? Usability, right? Usability is a big thing. So security and convenience don't always go hand in hand, right? It's fair, right? We want to make sure we keep things secure. We also want to make sure that things are convenient. So there's a balance there. And of course, it's going to be up to us, up to developers, to come to a partnership to understand, what does that look like? What does that entail? And make sure that we properly apply those security principles in place. Make sure we find that balance. Performance, the broader the application is, the more connections. We want to make sure we can't tear it down. Like, denial of service is a very big potential vulnerability, especially with a lot of DDoS attacks coming out today. So the botnets up. We want to make sure things like that. It has good performance. It can maintain multiple connections as we go through. So that's another thing. Maintainability, testability. Make sure you understand like how well can we maintain this application. You put too many controls, too many complexity in there, it may not be easily to maintain. So you have to, again, find those balances and make sure it can be tested. So like testability is a big thing. I work with a lot of clients with different applications that have, login interfaces and stuff like that. And one of the first things they always put in place and make sure it's in place is multi-factor authentication, which is great, but it makes it very difficult to test. So you got to find ways to work around that, make sure you understand how these operate. Make sure you find a good way to test that application in every aspect possible. Design tools and testing. So the biggest thing people think about requirements, the first thing I think is threat modeling, which is true. That is a absolutely valid thing. Everybody should do it. And Paul mentioned it. Multiple people mentioned it today. I think we've all got a concept of what needs to be done. These are just a couple options for, for doing threat modeling. I'm not going to go through every single one. There's different benefits for each one. Like Stride, for example, pretty much looked at every single aspect of the application or the product or the platform, whatever you're developing, and sees to make sure that there's no stone unturned to find a vulnerability, find out how it can be exploited, what that problem could be, and how it will affect the company or the product. But on top of that, it's also very complex. So for small companies, for startups, probably can't do that. That's fine. So then things like Stride, or rather Dread, for example, which only focuses on the potential vulnerabilities that we see in the application as we're going through. So that's another way to look at it. We can be very targeted, but again, it's not as broad. So, and I won't go through the rest of them, but you get an idea that there's multiple ways to do threat modeling, multiple ways to kind of plan for an application. There are some tools out there. I think Compass Security, for example, has a threat modeling tool out there for applications. We could put inputs about how the applications work, and it'll tell you, look up for these types of potential attacks. So there's that. There's other tools there, data flow diagrams, and some of these threat modeling tools will actually provide a data flow diagram. Say, hey, this is what it looks like. User diagrams or use case diagrams, for example, also an option. And you can build these out yourself, or some tools may find out prototyping, all parts of the development process. But these are things we'll have to make sure we keep track at and make sure we look at security in every aspect of that layer. So, let's say something else. I don't remember. Anyway, the point is, as we come through for design reviews, as we go through, we're making sure that we involve everybody in the process. So developers, security comes in. Security has to come in and work with development team to make sure as we're going through that we have as much coverage of the application as possible. We understand how it's being designed. We understand how to properly protect it and put in layers to protect that. Quality assurance also has to come in because QA has to make sure that those security measures are in place. A lot of QA teams that I've seen or worked with, they just check the functionality. Hey, does it add the user when I put in add user? Yes. But is there any protection in there? They're not really testing that. And that's another aspect we have to look at, make sure that we're testing these security programs or these security layers that we're putting in, that those are part of the QA process. And this is an often step that's missed overall. And then you'll build some checklists, build some guidelines. Security can provide that to QA. There's different ways to get this. Find a process that works for your organization to actually make sure we're protecting this as the design process goes on. All right, next slide. Again, this goes back to, again, well said, communication, collaboration, talk to the teams. Keep an open communication line open for everybody. Make sure there's foster communication, that we're constantly working and going back and forth and trying to remove any type of burdens, any type of walls, any type of scenarios where somebody might push back and say, no, I don't want to do that, or it's going to slow us down. Like, I get that. Yes, security is not convenient, and it does slow down a little bit. Trying to find a balance of that security and that planning, that design. So these are all big things we have to make sure that they seem like they're smaller, but they all add up, and I get that. So promote a shared understanding of the security and the quality requirements. Right? Make sure that the development team understands why we need to protect this. There's different training programs out there. CheckMarx has this training program out there. A lot of companies have training programs out there. There's a lot of services teams here. We'll be happy to provide training for these kind of scenarios. Make sure that they understand why we're protecting this. And it's not we're just deciding to put in security because we need to put security, just do it. Don't do that. No, find a partnership, build that foster communication, build those relationships with the development teams so that they know that this is important and why it's important. And then, and then a culture of continuous improvement. Yeah, go to the next slide. So lastly, again, quick slide there. I'm not trying to PowerPoint you guys to death here. So is get involved, right? Whatever way you can, reach out to the teams, find out how the products are being developed, what products are being developed early on as possible, right? There's a lot of dev teams will come up, a product manager will come up with a product they want to develop, and then they just start running with it and they'll bring in security. So make sure you try and get involved as early as possible, reach out to them, make sure that they understand your restrictions, your requirements, and you understand their requirements, your stories. So that's kind of a big thing. In this day and age, I've been working applications and product for, I don't know, probably like 10, 15 years. And in the past, 15 years ago, it was like, oh, we're going to build a product quick and fast, come out with an MVP, and we'll add security later. That doesn't work anymore. It's not how applications can be developed anymore. So hackers look for these type of weak applications to find vulnerabilities and try and find a way to break in or get data. Like the whole Volkswagen thing. Yeah, they built an application and they built it quick. They got EVs out because EV was a big thing last 2-3 years, whatever. But they didn't really put the right policies in place for that security. So just get involved early as possible to protect the applications. All right, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Oh, hold on. You want to add me on there? That's my LinkedIn. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So, ask them.
Oh. Does anyone else have questions? You had a question? No?
No, I didn't have one. I thought it was very good.
Oh.
Short and sweet.
Thanks, short and sweet. What's that, sir? Oh,
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, thanks, everybody. Any questions? Let me know. Yeah.
All right. On to the next slide. All right, this is the point where we discuss future topics and get your input, very collaborative. So let's go through these. Well, in terms of one of the subjects, we've already decided that we're gonna, the next chapter meeting in April is gonna be on leveraging AI to secure the SDLC. You heard some of that today. There's a lot of vendors that are already replacing some components with AI components and so forth. So it's going to be focused on that. It should be pretty exciting. I expect to book this place out again for that one. So please watch for that one. There'll be more information coming. So some other topics that we want to get your input on, OWASP futures. So OWASP itself is developing a lot of new tools. You got Defect Dojo. They've got new standards and guidelines out there, API top 10, CD top 10 and all that. So we thought maybe we'd have a session on OWASP itself and all the different guidelines and new things that are coming out of OWASP. That's one option. AppSec metrics, maybe we have one that focuses on how you measure success and what different companies are doing to better do that, you know. We heard some KPIs and KRIs mentioned today. Some tooling around that maybe. Microservices security. So a lot of companies are moving towards not only API development, but mostly microservice development with reusable libraries for microservices. So how do we better secure those? Women in AppSec. Post-quantum cryptographic risks. So this is one that someone gave me. I think you gave it to me, Brent. This is a little bit over my head, but if people know about that one, you can vote on it. Yeah. So with those there, are there any that stick out? Any votes? Any preferences? Let me go through them one at a time. So OWASP futures. Anybody interested in that one? Not a lot of hands. AppSec metrics. Better ways to measure success. Okay, quite a few hands on that one. Microservices security. Few hands on that one. Women in AppSec. Some hands on that one. All right. And if you understand what it is, post-quantum cryptographic risks. We got a few hands on that one.
Maybe a December topic.
Yeah, maybe that's a end of the year topic as we could frame that more. So I think I'm out of all those votes, I think AppSec metrics had the most hands. So maybe we'll line up AppSec metrics for our summer session.
Yeah, July.
Thanks for the inputs. Next slide. Brent, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Are you able to hear me with this mic? Okay, good. So we restarted the OWASP chapter, I think about this time last year. We had our first meeting in April of 2024, which is now our 4th meeting. And when we started the chapter, we had about 38 people on the meetup that were registered for the chapter. And we like to say that as of yesterday, actually this morning, we have 344 people now in the meetup group from 38. We're very excited about the interest. We're working very hard to make sure that we maintain your interest. We bring content to you that makes sense to you, that makes you want to keep coming back. So if you feel like we're not meeting that goal, please let us know. If we are meeting that goal, let us know that as well. So we're also want to let you know that the metrics here, we're getting about 40 to 50 people showing up in person for every meeting and about 30 to 35 online now. So we have a pretty big crowd. And as you can see, we're maxing out this room already. Joe and I were already talking about how we can configure the room and maybe put another 10 people in here. But if we keep this up, it's going to be interesting to see where we need to go next, to say the least. But we'll figure that out as we go. So that's something I really wanted to bring everyone's attention, that we're just having some great success. We want to keep it going. So help us do that. And with that said, because of that growth, we have 9 people here helping to set this meeting up, and we need more like 15. So if you don't have to be part of, you don't have to be part of Frost Bank, even though that's kind of where it is right now. We're kind of co-hosting this. Anyone that's part of the OWASP meetup group, if you want to get involved, please do that. We're having weekly board meetings. Be able to, because this takes a lot of work to put this together at this level of delivery. So we meet every Wednesday, and so if you'd like to start helping us, we'd like to have you help us do that. What's the next slide? Oh yeah, the good stuff. So we want to thank. We missed somebody there. CheckMarx. What happened to CheckMarx? Well, that's all right. Well, we had a little snafu here, guys. Sorry about that, but we'll make sure we call everybody out. We cannot do this event without our sponsors. That's what pays for the room, pays for the food, pays for everything we're doing. And so we're very excited about doing that. Go back. So today we had Snyk, we had CheckMarx, we had Contrast Security. Contrast is here. You can see that. Snyk has also got some stuff to be able to give away, and so and then Snyk, checkmarks, and contrast. So those three are the ones that hosted today's meeting. So we want to make sure you guys know about that stack. We had Wall Arm, which is awesome. They're sponsoring the happy hour after the end of this session. So Wall Arm is offered to do that. So I want to make sure we call out Wall Arm specifically for the happy hour. So those are the four sponsors that provided the support for this meeting. Next slide. So we think we've got this figured out now, how to do these certificates of attendance. So you guys can do CPE credits. Most of you should have had it delivered last week from the last meeting. I know it took us almost 90 days to do that, but I think some of you, if you provided your email addresses, you should have got these certificates. If you didn't let us know, we should have delivered all of them as much as we could. If you provided your email address today, you will get another certificate of attendance. So make sure you don't leave here without making sure we have your email address. And if you feel like you don't, on the San Antonio OWASP national page, not Meetup, but national page, you can email all the leaders of the OWASP chapter to give us your email address if you want to do that. So that's what it's going to look like. All we can do is acknowledge your attendance. OWASP does not provide any official attendance certificate like ISC Squared does or ISSA. That's just OWASP's process. Jeff? So that's a little bit of an issue for us. Moving on. Next slide. Mr. Zuri. It's all right. So the next date we already have is April 19th. It's going to be the third Friday of April. Same time, same place. And we're looking forward to having that. And then we also now want to do the raffle. So we've got some really fun stuff for that. What happened to our raffle page? It disappeared. Go back up a little bit. I thought it was a little bit more. Well, that was it?
That was it.
Oh, okay. We missed it though. All right. So let's start that. Where's the raffle tickets over there? Let's bring the basket. It's going to be fun. Here, take that there. All right. Donna, can y'all bring the raffle prizes up? Please. Okay, we have quite a number today. We're pretty excited about it. We have more and more sponsors that are helping with the raffle prizes. So we have Snyk that's providing that. We have Salt that's providing. We also have Optiv, me doing that. We also have Stackhawk. That's going to be kind of fun.